Hello.
What's up, guys?
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Music Maniacs with Sight After Dark.
Woohoo!
We are Sight After Dark. I'm Dan Berg.
I'm Sifa Graffiti.
If you don't know, we're a band out of Brooklyn, New York, and all we want to talk about all the time is music.
Yeah.
So that's why we started this podcast, to talk about the best musicians, their stories, and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And today, we're talking about an absolute legend of music.
An icon, a reggae icon.
One of, if not the most famous artist to ever come from the island of Jamaica.
Yep, a third world superstar.
Some would say the first superstar from the third world.
Yes, correct.
And if you don't know who we're talking about by now, we are talking about Robert
Nesta
Marley.
Hey.
So our boy Bob was born on February 6th,
Yes.
1945.
Yeah, they say that, but there's like evidence of him also being born on April 6th, and there's no actual birth certificate.
I think he was born in 1912.
Who is he?
Nobody will ever know. So he was born in 9 Mile, Jamaica.
Yeah.
Like a small town, and like the north side of the island, right?
Yeah, in St. Anne. He's born like right in the country. It's pretty much like center in the country. And in 2009, the population was 300.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the population doubled when Bob was born.
Exactly.
His mom was a Jamaican woman, and his dad was an Englishman.
Yeah.
Who was part of like the Royal Navy or some shit, right?
Yeah, and then he was hired to oversee like the colonial plantation that was still in Jamaica at that time. So he was working there, up there in the countryside.
Yes. So that is how Bob came to be conceived. And he was born in like I said, like a small town, and he lived there until he was like 11 or 12.
Right.
Before they moved to Kingston.
Yeah. They moved down into the big city.
The big city. Specifically Trenchtown.
Yes.
In Kingston.
Yeah, which is more like a poverty-stricken part of the city. And they call it Trenchtown because there's a big trench there.
Lots of trenches, lots of towns. And it was a really interesting place because there was like you had mentioned, it was kind of a poverty-stricken place. It was more or less the ghetto, right?
Yeah.
And people were basically in these compressed areas where there's a lot of people and not a lot of space. Yeah. And one thing that people were able to do in these places to kind of escape the areas that they were in was to play music.
Play music, yep. And Bob was like a big music person before he had even moved to Kingston. He was interested in music. Well, first he was a palm reader, but he decided to retire from palm reading, I think at the tender age of like 5 or 6. And
it wasn't as lucrative as music.
And I wonder why. But so he really got into music, and then he wanted to move to Trenchtown. I don't know. I think his mom was down there already, and he went to meet his mom down there. Yeah. Yeah, and his mom was with a man who was the father of another artist named Bunny Wailer. And Bob and Bunny grew up together pretty much in the same house. They had the same, like, they shared the same bed, like they were kids together. Yeah.
And so there was a lot of things going on musically at the time. So when it came to like Jamaican music, the bigger thing was like ska. Yep. Right? And ska is very fast paced.
Yeah, more up tempo. Yes.
More like that. I should probably bring a guitar down and like say the chords.
That'd be cool.
So, there's so many things going on right now musically because, so they were also getting influenced by American artists.
Yes, yeah. You had like the Sam Cooke kind of style, like, Wilson Pickett kind of style as well. And Jamaican music was more on the rock steady, ska vibe. And then when that kind of popular American music really started to get more worldwide, they were like, well, we can kind of do that too.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's really interesting because the things that really stood out to them and that were popular to them were like the R&B groups of the day, like the vocal groups, like all the harmony, like the Temptations, the Miracles, like things like that. Right. So when they originally got together, like Bob and Bunny Wailer and eventually Peter Tosh, when they came together, they weren't even playing instruments at first. They were a vocal group.
They were vocalists,
in the same style.
Yeah. They realized that, it's so funny because they call themselves a lot of names before. They called themselves the Wailers. They were like the Teenagers, and then it was like the Wailing Wailers. But their sound it does have like a wailing sound to it. And Bob's lead vocals had that like really crazy wail, and Bunny and Peter's background vocals really supported that really well, and they noticed that too. Like they had like a signature sound when all the three of them made their music together. Yeah,
and you'll see at this time, if you look at pictures of them from this time, they clearly were trying to be like one of those groups. Like they're wearing the suits.
Yes.
They had the short hair.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like it was like clearly like, oh, we want to be like a Motown group almost. But Motown South. You know what I mean? So I mean, they just had a lot of time to really like delve deep into the music, and Bob, Peter, and Bunny were always super into the music, and this is the thing. So this is when they started to really develop their own sound.
Yeah,
is because they started to kind of change the more popular ska sound and kind of slow it down a little bit.
Yeah, slowing it down more with more of a heavy bass line groove to it. And they sought out a producer that would kind of, let's say, enhance their sound and make it more solidified and make it actually a product, as opposed to them just singing out and playing.
Right, and just singing out on the streets, basically.
Exactly. And that producer was Coxsone Dodd.
Shout out. But I want to take this opportunity now to make an example of like the difference between ska and reggae, of just like the beat. So basically, ska is a lot faster, a lot like dancier, right? So it's something you would hear more in like a dance club kind of thing, So hold on, I'm trying to get the mic so you can you hear that?
Yeah.
So a ska would be like,
simmer down.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
It would be, it's a lot faster. It's a lot higher BPMs. But with the reggae, it...
Kinky reggae now.
So, and then with that, it really gives the bass a lot more room to grow, and a lot more room to like thrive in the song, because you're slowing it down and there's so much more space in between the notes that you can really get the bass going to, instead of the fast do 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 do, like whatever, it's like do 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 do, in between the different like guitar chords and the rhythms. And it really, the bass has always been to me like the signature sound of reggae.
Me too. And it also, because they were such good vocalists, the bass, the heavy bass and the sustained bass always allows your vocals to breathe more. You can do so much more with that. You can just hold notes, you can make them float up and down, because the bass is so dug deep into the rhythm that you as a vocalist with the higher sound, the higher chords, tones and stuff like that can just go all over the scale with it.
Right, that's definitely true. As opposed to if you have more higher instruments, like, again, and ska had a lot more horns too. So it's a lot more of a higher register. So when you have a bunch of instruments on the high part, you kind of have to fight almost to like get your space. But with the reggae, with the slow down, it's a little more stripped down. So it gives you more opportunity for a wail to just like soar over the music.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's really when they started to develop their super signature sound, and when they became a little more popular. And I think I believe it was their first single, Simmer Down, became like #1 in Jamaica. Yeah.
That's a good one. I mean, even still now to this day, it's a good, cool party song to listen to.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
So they're like making their music, and they're working with Coxsone Dodd, but they kind of felt like the sound wasn't really solidified, and they wanted to do more. Like they wanted to get bigger, so they brought in Lee Scratch Perry, who's more like, he's more eclectic, even if you watch him making his music, he's an artist as well as a producer.
Definitely.
So he lightened up the Wailers sound. It was more, it had like a deeper tone to it, and more of like a serious tone to it, but Scratch had a way of making Bob sound a little bit more happy, and the songs sounded more festive, even though some of them were like serious songs. You could play them at a party, so they had a really good connection with Scratch Perry.
Yes, producer extraordinaire.
Yeah. Even his pictures is like
Yeah, and the sound that he produces is very distinctive as well.
Yeah.
It's like just soaked with reverb, soaked with delay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you know it's a song that he produced when you hear it.
Yeah, it's true. That's true. I'm thinking of like his other artists that he worked with. So they were other big artists at the time, of course, like Toots and the Maytals that we know, you know what I'm saying? And like, you know, Burning Spear, of course, that everybody knows too as well. So, you know, they got with scratch and they want to get bigger than Jamaica. You know what I'm saying? So let's go on the road with them. Let's see how far they go.
And there's some other things going on with them at this point as well, kind of like religiously, right? So when they first started, they were like Christians. They were like going to church and like singing in church and stuff.
Yeah, I think Bob was Catholic. Yeah.
And that wasn't what he was going to be for his entire life.
No.
So around this time, because Selassie came to Jamaica, right?
Yeah, he came. It's so interesting. He came the same year Bob married Rita Marley. So while Bob was in Kingston, you know, he met a young woman named Rita Marley. They started becoming friends. They ended up getting married. And then Bob heads to Delaware. His mom goes to Delaware to find work, and Bob heads there. And somewhere at around that time, his marriage and stuff, he starts contemplating like the Rastafarian religion. And that same year, 1966, Haile Selassie, Emperor of Ethiopia, comes to Jamaica to visit. And everybody fanned the F out.
Yeah, everybody was fanning on him. Because, yeah, I mean, he was the Emperor of Ethiopia back when Italy invaded them, and he was really like the head of like the resistance. Yeah. Basically. So, I mean, he became really a symbol of like the resistance of Africa versus Europe, really.
Yeah, I believe one of the only countries that did not like fall under like a whole big colonial rule. So he definitely was like a symbol for the continent.
Yes, absolutely. And then when he came to Jamaica, it was a huge deal. Like, there was just crowds and crowds like waiting for him. Yeah. And that really sparked the flame, if you will, of Rastafarianism in Jamaica. Yeah. Because they really saw him as a prophet, if not like the second coming of Jesus, no?
Yeah, they did see him as that. Yeah, which is interesting. But yeah, they did. I mean, many people worship him, and they actually saw him as God. I believe even Bob did see him as like God, like on earth, which is interesting.
It's very interesting. And another thing associated with that is a certain plant. Has a lot of names. We'll just call it cannabis for now. We'll go with the scientific name, which I think also probably affected the sound of the music. Yeah. Because if you're listening to ska, it's really fast paced, it's really energetic, it's really, you know, and then you smoke a joint and you're making music, you might be a little, you know what I mean? You might be slowed down a little bit.
Let's bring this down a little bit to a groove.
You know, so I'm not saying that's the only reason that reggae ended up getting that slower sound, but I do think that has something to do with it.
Absolutely. I think so too.
Yeah, 100%.
It's all mixed in. Like, yeah. I mean, even like with reggae music, I mean, it's very heavily dominated by the Rastafarian culture, but you have a lot of Jamaicans. Jamaica is a very conservative country, believe it or not. You will get thrown in jail for smoking weed in public in Jamaica, and you cannot have like dreads in your hair and work in like a bank or anything like that in Jamaica. Very conservative country. But even the conservative Jamaicans do find kind of like kinship with the music, and they'll yell out songs that are talking about Jah and Rastafari and stuff like that, and that's not their religion like at all. But yeah, I think it's all encompassing.
Right. Right. So yeah, like we were saying, so around this time Bob got married, and then he left for the United States 3 days after he got married.
Peace.
He's like, okay, this was a great wedding. I'm going to go hang out with my mom and get some work. I think he was working in like a Chrysler factory in Delaware.
He was on his honeymoon. What?
By himself.
Of course. Of course. Where's the best place to have a honeymoon?
Yeah.
Delaware. By the Chrysler factory.
Of course. In the Chrysler factory. Exactly. They have a great banquet hall.
Exactly.
Yeah, so he was in the U.S. for a while, and again, he's just soaking up more music. And eventually he goes back to Jamaica. He's back with the Wailers, and they're just they're getting more and more successful. Yeah. They're becoming one of the biggest music acts in Jamaica. Yeah. For sure. And it gets to the thing, like you were saying before, like they kind of got to a point where like, okay, well, I think we're going to be bigger than Jamaica. So they actually went to London.
Yes, they did.
And had a meeting with a record exec at Island Records, which I think it's funny that they were at Island Records.
I know.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't remember the name of the exec. I really probably should have looked that up.
Chris Blackwell.
He believed in them. Yeah. And at this time, Jamaican music, or reggae was Jamaican music.
Yeah.
Like, people outside of Jamaica didn't even really know about reggae that much.
Right, because in the Caribbean, in the English-speaking Caribbean, the biggest music is calypso. You know, so you think about like Trinidad, Barbados, Guyana, they're playing calypso at this time. They're not really, maybe a tiny bit of ska, and of course the flow over from the American R&B artists is definitely in the rest of the English-speaking Caribbean. But yes, reggae is Jamaican at this point.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they were signed to Island Records, and it was really a huge gamble for them at the time, because you're talking about a British label signing a Jamaican reggae band when nobody really knew nobody knew reggae outside of their area.
Yeah.
So people were saying to him, like, you shouldn't sign them. They're going to take the money. You're never going to get a record out of that. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, and they kind of had a bad reputation, Bob and the Wailers. They were rude boys. So they were, you know what I'm saying? They were on the streets. They were kind of rough around the edges. They weren't, like, super sophisticated and stuff like that. So, it may have been a tiny bit true. Like, they could possibly say, I'm taking this money to feed my kids, feed myself. Like,
yeah. And I think maybe we should talk about, like, the whole rude boy thing for a while, because it's really became like the ghetto youth, right? And like a rude boy of like you're really just struggling to get by, and maybe you have to commit some kind of crimes, you got to do some things, and it's funny because a lot of people were saying that Rastafarianism actually became like an alternative to the rude boy lifestyle, because it became more spiritual and less violent and things like that.
Definitely. And I feel like Bob was a good face for that, because what I find that a lot of people that know him and other artists say, the difference between him and all the other people in Kingston was that he lived in the country for so long. And I have been up to the country in Jamaica, and this was like 97, 98, and I could say that yes, it probably was only a couple hundred people in that area. It's very serene, very quiet, and like it gets really dark and stuff like that. And Bob knew the difference between the country and the city, so he was able to put that in the music, and that kind of made him a commercial rude boy in a way. Right.
So in a way, you would say maybe he had more experience with humanity than if he was just in the city, just in the ghetto.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. And that is a cool thing. When you do have more of a relationship with humanity, nature, and stuff like that, that can take you to so many different parts of the world, as opposed to if you're like just a city person. Right. It's hard to like expand your mind in a way, because you have so many things readily available for you in the city. Right. You don't have to go through social mannerisms, getting to know, feeling out vibes and stuff like that. You just get it in the city.
Right. And I think that those experiences probably had a lot to do with why Bob and his music were so relatable to so many people around the world, because he was able to see the urban side of things, but also the rural side of things at the same time, and just seeing all these different kinds of people and all the different lifestyles that they were living.
I think so too.
So Island Records signed them. Yeah. He gave them £4,000.
4,000, and I loved his idea of them because he saw them as like a rock band. He said he wanted to sell them as a black rock band, which was interesting to me. But it's rock, Chris. But anyway, like what the fuck? Like, do you know rock music history? But I see them as a rock band, and I've always kind of said this when we talk about music and stuff. What is that sound that a lot of 70s artists have, and like how my dad said, it's probably like the engineering in the studio. Yeah. And I feel like this is definitely a connection here with the English recording and like Jamaican artists and stuff like that, because coming up as a musician, like Bob Marley was like my first Led Zeppelin. It was like I went through stages, like when I was really little, like I really loved Marvin Gaye, and I was like, I gotta hear every song that he's made. Yeah. And then with Bob Marley, when I was younger, that's what happened. I was like, I need to hear every single album, every single song. And then when I got to my teenage years, it was Zeppelin, and I was like, I need to hear every single thing that they make. And they all have like kind of like a continuous like connection to them, even like their artwork in a way, like with Zeppelin and the Wailers and Bob Marley and the Wailers. Something about the different albums, something about it is all like the same. And it's interesting that Blackwell said that he wanted to market them as a rock band, because they are that. Yeah. Like,
yeah. And that is basically what they ended up doing. So the marketing. So they did make the record, and he said something really cool. He's like, so I flew down to Jamaica and I heard the record, and I've been in studios, and I know how much money it costs to make something, and I could tell that they put all that £4,000 into that record.
Nice.
And so then he was like, okay, I'm going to start marketing them as a rock group, basically, right? He's going to do all the things that the rock groups are doing. And he's going to put them on the shows that the rock groups are playing and all that kind of shit. And it worked. Yeah. Everybody saw them and was just like, wow, this is great. Yeah. This is great music. Yeah. And it is what it is.
It is what it is. I heard that they went on they opened for Sly and the Family Stone, and they got fired because they were making more of a sound than the headliner. They were like, hell no, get these Wailers out of here.
Yeah, yeah. And around that time, so now they're starting to get more famous outside of Jamaica, obviously, because their music is being released on a wider scale. Yeah. The first album they released with them was called Catching Fire, right?
Yeah, Catch a Fire.
Catch a Fire, sorry. Yeah. Catching Fire is a Hunger Games book. Close enough.
Read it while you listen to Catch a Fire.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And then another thing that happened around this time. So there's a person that we don't like to talk about too much on this podcast called Eric Clapton, who did a cover of one of their songs, I Shot the Sheriff, and that also made reggae and really Bob and the Wailers a lot more famous by itself.
Yes, because that went number one.
Yes, so that was a huge song. So then they're already more known from that, and now they're actually putting out the album that they already are being a little more known. So this album, it becomes huge. Yeah. Right? And they everywhere around the world, they're starting to become known now.
Yeah, I love that album. I love the cover art of that album because Bob's afro is getting bigger, and you can tell it's getting on its way to dreads. Yeah. So you see them through different stages, like of their like spiritual development and also their musical development by just looking at the artwork. So that's cool. Yeah, and that is something that's really interesting. Like I can always just look at his hair and know what era it is. You know what I mean? Because it's like once he went into Rastafarianism, he was like, he didn't cut his hair. No. So it's like you could see like before he had the short hair, and then you could just see it slowly growing all the way up until, you know, the last images that we have of him. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, so they're getting bigger and bigger, and at this point, I don't know exactly why this came about, but Blackwell was kind of like, I think you're kind of the guy. Well, with more money and more fame comes sobriety. No, but also, you know, people are fighting for whatever. Everybody's becoming a name. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? That's Peter Tosh from the Wailers. That's Bunny Wailer. So then it's like, okay, well, Bunny doesn't like to leave Jamaica at all. Right. Peter sometimes wants to go, sometimes doesn't. Right, you know? Right. And just by knowing the Caribbean attitude, it's very chill. You know what I'm saying? So if it's not today, it really is not today. Like, yeah. It's not gonna happen. So I think that's what was happening. You know, money has to be made, and you got people that are moody. They don't feel like coming. You know, they think they're bigger than it. You know what I'm saying? And it is bigger than you at this point. And that's why Chris was like, okay, well, we're going to have to do something about this.
Yeah, if you're trying to arrange a tour and 2/3 of the band are kind of wishy-washy about when they want to leave and when they want to stay, it's kind of hard to schedule a tour. Yes. So at this point, it goes from the Wailers to Bob Marley and the Wailers.
Right, because then a Wailer could be anybody. So Peter could show up if he wants. Right. But Paul can too. Like, you know.
But Bob's there the whole time.
The whole time.
No matter what. And he's clearly becoming a superstar at this point. Yeah. And it's not really something, it doesn't seem like he ever really wanted to be a superstar like that. Like, his message was always kind of the same, even when he got super rich. Yeah. And they were saying stories like once he got money, like he would buy a BMW, which he said, it's perfect. It's because it's Bob Marley and the Wailers, BMW. That is pretty But then perfect. he would drive around. He would like not even lock his doors. He'd be in Kingston, just leave the windows open, like no big deal. He was just doing all the same shit. He just had a little more money now.
Yeah. Cool guy.
So he's cool guy. So he's getting more known. He's getting more famous. And he's becoming more of a figurehead of Jamaica, like as the country. I mean, he's starting to go places where he's going to New Zealand and they're giving him like a state welcome, like he's a head of state or some shit. Yeah, you know what I mean? Yeah.
They're getting to the point where they can't even do regular shows. They have to have stadium-sized shows now. Like that's their only booking when they're leaving Jamaica. Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, but if you listen to the music, it's not crazy.
Right?
Right, yeah. Bob Marley's music is like he says so many things that you're kind of thinking of, and then he says so many things that you never thought of or you never really contemplated on. And I think that's just like the beauty of his lyrics. Like, you know?
Right.
You know?
Right.
He's like, and he tells a great story, like say Catch a Fire. I think that has Burning and Looting on it. And that's a good example of reggae music, because that's like do 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 do. And he's like, I woke up in a curfew, I was a prisoner. He was like, I couldn't recognize the faces standing before me. Like, it's just like, you're just like, and then
right,
like,
right,
you know, you're just hanging on all of his words. I think he's just such a great lyricist. I did hear that a lot of the Rastas up in the mountains gave him some of his lyrics to put down on paper with a combination of Psalms from the Bible, which you can't go wrong with a Psalm.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and it's just like, it's such beauty in his writing style that, of course, he was getting bigger. Like, of course.
Yeah, he was doing things like that. The song War is literally, he took the words of Selassie from a speech that he made at the UN, and he turned that into a song. Yeah. So he's really expanding like the songwriting that he's in. He's this great lyricist, great storyteller, and then his voice is amazing. Yeah. And it's funny, it like seeing the live performances, it's like he has so much energy. Like, it's so interesting because the music, when you hear, you know, a reggae song, you probably might not be jumping up and down in your home listening to it. Yeah. But you watch Bob on stage, he was jumping all over the place. Yeah. He was screaming, he was wailing. You know what I mean? Like, the energy that he put into it was amazing.
Yeah, I love his moving style too, because he kind of, like, watching him move around on stage gave me the feel like that I can move rhythmlessly. Like, you know, and not in a bad way. You know, he's kind of like arching his back and he's falling. He's like not falling, but, you know, he like stands and he stands for a while and then he moves for another. Like, he's not necessarily moving to the beat like a crooner or anything. Like, he's just moving and he's like catching different parts of the music. And it's like that kind of like helped me like free up myself, like as a person on stage or somebody to move around. Like, I don't have to just stick to the beat. I could just like be me. Like, you know? Like, I think that's cool. I love to watch him on stage move because he's not a big guy, you know, and you just get to see him move all over the place, and it's just awesome with all of that energy.
Yes. So he's getting bigger and bigger and bigger across the entire world, and now he's become a figurehead of Jamaica. Yeah. And Jamaica was going through a rough time. Yes. At this period. There was a lot of political violence. There was a lot of people there was violence all the time, but not a lot of political violence. A lot of people being murdered based on their views, people just getting shot dead in the street. Yeah. And obviously, Bob's not happy about that. He wants there to be peace and love in the world, and especially in his own country. Yeah. So I don't even want to say that he gets involved with politics. It's more like politics gets involved with him. Yeah, I would say that the politicians kind of used him in a way because his music is like, you know, you're talking about kind of like the Bruce Springsteen of like, you know, in terms of like speaking for the working class, you know, singing out songs about issues that people that have less money go through. So they're kind of like using his music to spearhead their party's movement, you know what I'm saying? Whether it's like the Jamaican the JLP, I don't know exactly how to say it, but it's the JLP and the PNP. It's like the People's Party and the Jamaican Liberation Party. And the JLP is more like they thought they were more like on the communist side in a way, and the PNP is more like on the socialist side, and they felt like that side was like going towards like Castro and stuff. So there was like a lot of like uproar, and they felt like the music, if we can get a face for the music, we can use him to socially program the people. Yeah, absolutely. And because he had already created such a following, so many people followed him. Even there might have been more people into him and following him than some of these parties. Right. So some of these politicians, they're looking at him like, oh, well, if we get him on our side, then we're winning. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So he almost got thrown into it. Yeah. And kind of sucked into it into a way.
Yeah, I think so too.
And he always wanted to make a concert for the people to come together. But it got a little delayed.
Yeah. Some people wanted to do it, then they didn't want to do it, then they wanted to have it at a certain venue, then not at a certain venue, and then it got canceled, and then it got reinstated, and then I think Bob's manager said something slick to somebody. Said something that he probably shouldn't have said.
Yeah. And then also, one day, Bob's at his house, he's hanging out, and we'll say a squad of assassins tried to get him.
Yeah.
And shot him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And that is also not a good thing to happen if you're trying to have a concert.
Exactly. So he gets shot. People are going crazy. They shot our prophet. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, he said something, his manager said something crazy like, don't send your errand boy or something. I don't know. He said something wrong to somebody, and then they crept up in his house and they shot them up. Bob wasn't the only one that was shot. I think somebody else was
Bob's
shot.
manager also got shot 4 times.
Yeah. Loose lips.
They were saying that he literally just happened to be walking into the kitchen when the shots fired, and he just walked right by where they were shooting.
Yeah.
And he there's pictures of Bob covered in blood, and it was actually mostly his manager's blood.
Yeah.
Because he got in the arm.
So watch the interview, guys. Tell us where.
Apparently, it grazed his chest and went into his arm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And after that, for good reason, he moved out of Jamaica for 2 years. He went to London. So that's another reason why the concert is not going to happen if your main guy is not there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can't blame him for wanting to move after that.
No, because you can easily get caught out there in Jamaica. It gets so dark at night. It's not like a big city where you have a bunch of streetlights, and it's just like somebody can be 5 feet away from you and you will not see them at all. So yeah, no.
So after living in London for 2 years, he goes back to Jamaica and he does do the concert. Yep. He does do the One Love Peace concert. And the highlight of that concert was that he got the 2 competing politicians on stage to shake hands, right? And that's a good moment.
Yeah.
That's a good moment. But, it's unfortunate that he had to literally get shot for those things to happen.
Right.
But the world isn't a perfect place.
It is not. And that was a crazy concert. Watching the footage from that concert, I'm talking about him dancing around. He does some crazy dance move and lightning struck at the same time.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
So it's whoa.
He was in touch with the nature.
I guess so. Or Thor. Who, I don't know.
Shout out to Thor.
He likes reggae.
We appreciate you, Thor. Don't think you go unnoticed, okay? But yeah, so after that, so now, again, they're a huge superstar. He's a huge superstar. He's touring all over the world now.
He's making the babies. He's touring. He's got the women. He's doing his thing.
He's making lots of babies. And, he's just getting bigger and bigger. I mean, like you said, at this point, the only venues that they can play are football stadiums. And it was funny, before that, apparently he had been offered to tour with some other bigger band. It was Toots opened for the Stones. Yeah. And then Bob was asked to open for, why am I blanking on it?
I don't know.
Some other big band, but he decided not to. And instead of doing 60,000 feet arenas back then, or 60,000 person arenas back then, he was doing the smaller, 500, 600 person amphitheaters or whatever. And that kind of allowed his following for him to get bigger. Yeah. Not I love the Stones. Oh yeah, and their opener was cool. Right. It's no, we're going here for Bob.
Yeah, smart move.
Very smart move. So yeah, it's just getting bigger and bigger, and at this point, he's only able to play stadiums. So after touring, he's playing shows in Africa, he's playing shows in Zimbabwe, he's going to New Zealand, Australia, Europe. Yeah. They get a US tour ready for him. Yeah. And nobody knew that this was going to be his last tour. No. At the time.
Yeah, and apparently he had been sick already, but he had been sick for more than a year, but nobody knew that, at all. And then he got diagnosed with a sort of melanoma.
Yes, it was a form of cancer that started on his foot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. There used to be an urban legend that he got it playing soccer, he kicked the ball or whatever, but we have debunked this. Yeah. No, he had that for a while.
What kind of soccer ball was that?
It's the cancerous one.
It's a pesticide soccer ball. But so he was diagnosed with cancer as this tour was going on. And it spread pretty quickly because due to his religious beliefs, he was not into Western medicine. Western medicine, I mean, that's part of Babylon. That's part of the colonialism. That's part of everything he's fighting against, really. Right, yeah. So he's not going to go to a hospital and get cancer treatments. Yeah. So the cancer was able to spread pretty rapidly. And the last show that he played was in Pittsburgh. He was on his way to go back to Jamaica because I think he knew he was going to die at this point.
Yeah.
He was on his way to go back to Jamaica, but he had to make a pit stop in Miami and ended up dying in Miami instead.
Yeah, he passed away there, which is, a good place to die. I can't be mad at that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just sad. It's sad the way that it all happened. I feel like when you hear the story, it's like maybe, he was sick before he realized what it was and before other people really realized what it was.
Yeah.
But when you hear about it, it just sounds like it just seems like it happened so fast.
Yeah, it was just like and them too, like the whole Bob Marley and the Wailers moment. It feel like it was like it happened and then it didn't happen. It's kind of like Zeppelin. Like it happened in like late 60s and it ended like right around like 1980. It was like that's it. It's over.
Yeah.
Like, it's like interesting. But yeah, he got really, really sick and he didn't like the Western medicine. It's like in hindsight, you're like, oh man, but you drove a BMW. Just get the chemo.
Yeah.
That's the point. Like if it's like rapid like that where it's going to go through your whole body, I don't think like teas and herbs are necessarily going to take it away. I feel like if it's an organ, you can kind of target that with like holistic medicine. But if it's like going through the whole system, it's like, oh man, like that's a tough one to call. But I mean, Bob left an amazing legacy, and not just Bob, like the Wailers themselves. You have like the female backup, like the I3s, who's Rita Marley, Judy Mowat, and Marcia Griffiths, who were three artists of their own. I don't know what big song Judy Mowat has. I was supposed to look it up and find it. But I know Marcia Griffiths is the Electric Slide. That's her big one. And of course, Rita Marley is like, I want to get high, so high. That one's her big one too. And Bunny Wailer's his own artist. Peter Tosh was his own artist as well.
Legalize it.
Exactly. Everyone is crying out for peace. None is crying out for justice. That's a good line. When I first heard that, I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't want no peace.
Yeah.
I need equal rights and justice. Good lines. He's Peter Tosh wasn't my favorite singer.
Yeah.
But lyrically, he's got some really good gems on his album.
100%. And he definitely was the most aggressive of the three of them, I think.
Yeah, because he died violently right after. It was some type of argument with him and his girlfriend. I think his girlfriend got him in trouble. But and then he ended up getting shot too and passing away like really like almost right after Bob passed away. I think it was like 2 years. But it's crazy how quickly like the Wailers came and went, but they've got so many albums and such a legacy. Even like Bob's kids as well. Like
Yeah, so many of Bob's kids have gone on to become musicians as well. And it's just like, it is crazy. It's really just like a moment in time, that just lasts really forever.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, even after he died, they put out the compilation album Legend, right? Which became the biggest selling reggae album ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not just the music, because the things that he was spreading, like, it not only was it kind of Jamaican culture and Rastafarianism worldwide, but like people didn't really know Jamaica like that in a lot of places around the world. Like we were saying, he was like the first third world superstar.
Right.
And like that music wasn't really known outside of that area. And mostly because of Bob, but obviously the whole Wailers, everybody involved with it. I mean, the people that signed him, all this stuff, it became a global phenomenon.
Yes.
More so than, anything specifically Caribbean.
Right. It's true. It's really, really true. I mean, how many knit hats with dreads at the bottom of them do you see all over the world? Like, it is a big thing. And, reggae music does bring people together, which is another beautiful, beautiful thing. I think I like that. I mean, not just because of the music, but, socially, like, you know what I mean? You can just forget about certain things when you're all at that reggae concert,
Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful thing that, like, when you think about Bob Marley, like, you do think about the music, but you also think about his message. And you think about what he represented and just the culture that he was able to spread. Because it's like, yeah, if it wasn't for Bob Marley, like, there was, I don't know, like, I just, like, everything would be different as far as, like, I think even people's perceptions of Jamaica. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just so crazy that like one person that's a musician can really have that kind of impact on people.
Yeah. He definitely had like an inner like connection with like the whole world. Even like he made political songs for like Zimbabwe and their like liberation. They became independent. He made a whole big song about that, and he was an advocate for their independence as well. It's just very, very wonderful to know that we had an artist like that in Time. I think, speaking of Time, I think Time magazine called him the biggest artist of the second half of the 20th century. Which is crazy. Take that, Frank Sinatra. No, I'm just take that, Billie Holiday.
Yeah, that is crazy. It is crazy, and it's just, I don't know. It's just one of those things. Like, I always think of Bob Marley, and I just think of like good vibes.
Me too.
You know what I mean? I just think of like people coming together, happiness, peace. You know what I mean? At least that's what he always wanted to spread.
Yeah.
With his message, and I feel like he really did do it. You know,
Me too.
so I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately, people co-op messages and make it commercial and shit after. I mean, now you got Bob Marley rolling papers people are selling. You got Bob Marley branded like everything.
Yeah.
And obviously that has nothing to do with him, but it's like it's sad how sometimes things can get co-opted like that, because he seems so pure in his message the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. I would hope that the families I hope y'all got in on some of this marketing, you know what I mean, and these things. Like, I would hope so, because he did have so many children, you know what I'm saying, and they do. Shorty can't eat no books, can't eat no records. They do have to make money. So I would hope that a lot of that marketing went into not only like the musical legacy, but also the actual physical legacy, like the people that are still here after him. Shout out to Junior Gong. I feel like Damian Marley is his dad. Like, he has the same, his voice has the same impact or similar impact that his dad had on me. So I feel like Ziggy, his first son, did his own thing, and that's a cool thing. Like, that's the type of junior that you kind of want, where it's like, okay, this guy's Bob Marley's son. He wasn't named after Bob Marley,
right?
But he's got his own lane, which was more like a pop reggae kind of vibe, you know. And I thought that was cool, to see that, like, he wasn't trying to be his dad. That was awesome, because his dad was coming in Junior Gong. But he's got other songs. I mean, other sons that make music. I think it's Kimani Marley,
Stephen Marley as well.
Yeah, Stephen Marley makes music, and I think Rowan was like a football player or something like that. I think that is Lauryn Hill's husband or kid's father.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
And then also I just remember this, like, so not only was he taking care of his kids, but I mean, he literally brought like industry to Jamaica. Like, he was opening like record plants and recording studios, and he was employing like thousands of people. Like, thousands of people are having their livelihood better because of him.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing. And what's crazy, there's some like dancehall artists that say this. They say that Bob Marley's death pretty much started dancehall music.
Interesting.
Because they felt like when Bob Marley died, like, it's like the peace was over. And, dancehall music is more like rap. It's got a lot of gun lyrics, a lot of vulgar lyrics and stuff like that, gang promotion and stuff like that.
Right.
And like artists like Bounty Killer, like, that, that's when dancehall was born, the death of Bob Marley. So sound off in the comments. Let me know if you agree with that. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. I guess maybe like when he was around, it would almost feel disrespectful to be doing shit like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But then after he's gone, it's just like, all right, well, we're doing our own shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, possibly.
That is really interesting.
Yeah.
Wow, I never thought about that. But yeah, I mean, Bob is an absolute legend. His music will live on forever. He will live on forever.
Oh, yeah.
And it's been a great time talking about him.
Yeah.
We hope you guys have enjoyed the episode. Thanks for being here. If you're still here, we appreciate you. If you want to support, check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/musicmaniacs, to help us keep doing this, to make more episodes and more content for you guys. And until then, that's about it.
Peace, guys.
Sight After Dark, out.